Dun, dun, dun. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of She-Hulk. Of course, diving in this week into episode 4. Is this not real magic? Yes, it's not Johnny Blaze, it's Donnie Blaze. I don't know if they're related. We'll probably get into it, but we got a great group of people to talk about this episode with. Joining us this week, first time in Talking She-Hulk, we have from Alyssa Jean's Reviews, Alyssa Jean.
Hello, I am Alyssa, and that's trademarked, so Titania cannot sue me.
Excellent. See, now that is planning ahead. Everybody pay attention to this stuff. And of course, joining me as every week he does from Enchantment of Eternity, it is Marc.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Here to do my cheap and stolen magic tricks. Here's a swan.
Aren't they all ultimately cheap and stolen? I don't know. I won't get into the whole magic discussion. But I do want to say thank you to everyone joining us live, everyone joining us in the archives. Thanks so much. And of course, as all of us YouTubers have to do, we have to pray down to please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the notifications, or don't. We're here every Thursday. You won't really miss us, but it's nice for numbers. Anyway, let's just kind of dive in here. Alyssa, let's start things off with you. This is your first time in with us. Marc and I have been discussing how we've been sort of feeling this show. How has She-Hulk come and resonated with you? And then what did you think about this week's topping off? This kind of being our big opening foursome, I think for all the major reviewers, this was the final four chunk that they saw all at once. So we were basically caught up with all the people that saw this early now.
Yes, so I have been absolutely enjoying the show. I was a huge fan of the sensational She-Hulk comic book. When was it? The early 90s, late 80s, something like that. But I just remember clearly the cover, and I remember even on the cover, she is breaking the fourth wall and talking to the reader. And I remember that being a really great parody of Marvel Comics itself. And there was another parody comic book called What the, and it had Spider-Ham in it, but it was a bit silly. And this was more in universe, and I found it to be a lot funnier and just a lot smarter. And when I found out the show was going to follow that model, I was really excited, and I am not disappointed. This is every bit as much is every bit the TV version of the comic book that I remember, though it has been years since I've read it. And I love when they really lean into parodying the MCU itself. I wish I was here last week because I really enjoyed that episode. I loved my favorite line is when the judge says Thor's speeches are not admissible in court. I mean, that's just such a great parody of Marvel itself. And I'm really liking how they're kind of exploring like the little nooks and crannies of the Marvel universe, of the MCU, things that are probably would happen in a universe like this, but aren't going to be covered in the more grandiose superhero films, like the fact that, hey, there's Asgardians living on Earth, and that includes elves that shapeshift, and maybe some of them aren't on the up and up, and they might be scamming people. Or this week, hey, maybe there was somebody who tried out with Wong for the mystic arts and failed and decided to become a second-rate magician instead. Like, I love how they're exploring all these the minutia of the Marvel universe that would probably exist if this were a real place that is just not ever going to be explored anywhere else. So I'm really enjoying that. However, this week's episode is definitely my least favorite. Okay. The humor just doesn't land for me as much. I don't feel that they were leaning into the parody as much as they were last week. I feel like they were leaning too heavily on that drunk chick, Madisynn, I guess, with the two N's and a Y. And I generally didn't find her that funny. I did actually enjoy her interactions with Wong. I like how she was spoiling The Sopranos for him, and I found the post-credit scene to be very cute. But her independently of Wong, I didn't find very funny, and I felt like they were going to her way too much for the humor, and it was getting old. Also, wasn't a huge fan of the B plot with the dating app. Maybe it hits too close to home. I mean, if you've done a dating app, we know they suck. I get it, they suck. Like, I just didn't find that funny or enjoyable to watch because I don't know, it might be hit too close to home. However, this is an episodic show. It does have running serialized storylines as we've seen. Those dudes from last week were brought up again. That's going to lead somewhere. We have Titania coming back, so we do have running threads, but it's very episodic. It's very much the case of the week, and in that format, you can have an episode that you don't like as much, and then as opposed to like a Miss Marvel or a Hawkeye or a Falcon and Winter Soldier, where one episode could potentially like make the dominoes start to fall, and because it's all episodes are dependent on each other. So I am still very high on the show overall. I'm still confident that I will end up enjoying the show overall. This week, maybe not my favorite overall, though.
Sure. Interesting point there, actually. It is one of the downsides of the kind of current streaming format of 6 to 8 to 12 episodes. They all kind of have to be good now. It's not like the old days when you had in your standard network 22 episodes a season. You can have the cheesy couple of, ridiculous episodes peppered through there because you're filling spots. And here, kind of feels like the pressure is on. What did you think, Marc? I know that you've been enjoying the series generally more favorably than I have, though I think overall we've both been mostly I think we've all had a pretty good time with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a bit disappointed with how negative this show's been received. I think people, they just don't really. They're taking it too seriously. I think. I still think that, especially this episode, probably more than other. I know I bring this up every week, but it reminds me of Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. And if you've never heard of that show, it's a cartoon that was on Adult Swim that had the Birdman lawyer, and every week he'd represent like a different known cartoon character. Like one time he represented Shaggy and Scooby for smoking marijuana or whatever. And so this show is reminding me a lot of that. And I like that it gets into the minutia of like what a real life like everyday situation, but in this world where there's magical beings. And it does make me think, like when we opened this episode with the Donnie Blaze, it made me think that like who would be impressed by these magic tricks anymore when there's like real life superheroes and demons running around. And maybe that's why he wasn't, and it kind of makes sense why he wasn't very popular. Now this episode, I kind of did like the Donnie Blaze storyline. It took me a little while to get into it, but I think out of the 2 episodes appearance of Wong, I think this was a better use of Wong himself. I think last week's episode was better, but I liked Wong in this episode better. I think they really brought out his comedic chops, which we got some glimpses of in the first Doctor Strange movie. Was it like he didn't know who Beyonce was or something, and he was looking at the end, and so he has like the real comedic potential. And I think this episode really brought it out, as Alyssa mentioned his relationship with Madisynn or whatever. And I too thought Madisynn was they overdid her, like she was a bit. It was a funny concept, but I think they went to that well a little bit too much in this episode. And the B plot with the dating, I agree with Alyssa. I didn't care for that at all. It's more of like, it's something we've seen. I've seen that a billion times before, where they use a dating app and they go on a date with all these guys and they're all assholes and up themselves or whatever. It's like, I got so much deja vu watching those things, because like I've seen tons of shows do that, and I didn't think it was really necessary or really brought anything out. Didn't really support the episode at all. Whereas last week, the A plot and the B plot were like both strong and supported each other. Where here this week, I think is more dependent on the A plot, which I did enjoy. I would probably say this is my least favorite of the 4, but I still really liked it. As it was, especially the whole Donnie Blaze thing. I thought that was hilarious.
And
Why
I
not?
agree about Wong and the comedic chops. Wong was definitely a strong point for this episode for me. And don't forget, he does karaoke with Shang-Chi in the first
Yeah,
credit scene.
yeah.
So, I did enjoy Wong as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they definitely knew what they were dealing with bringing Wong back. In fact, that's even the opening monologue by Tatiana Maslany, which again I do like. To me, the fourth wall breaking felt more even and properly paced in this episode. Mostly is the kind of like, oh, I know you're excited for Wong. Everybody loves Wong. You know, he's the Paul Rudd of the Marvel universe, even though they actually do have Paul Rudd, which is funny. But yeah, he is awesome. And I agree. Leading into more the comedic, that this was actually a more involved story as opposed to just is he going to show up in time from last week. I completely agree. And I, it's funny that you bring up the Harvey Birdman because that was going to be part of my bring up because we've had this discussion, and I think this show more than any other really is dependent upon the lens that you are watching it through. If you are expecting goofy, that's the right thing. Funny, not so. I mean, it is funny and there are funny moments, but to me, when I was expecting, a Marvel comedy kind of leaning into more of just the comedic side of Marvel, whereas this really kind of lends even into more of the goofy Harvey Birdman, like, off the cuff, ridiculous kind of things, where you don't really apply logic. I mean, the fact that this was all based around this guy has a sling ring. Wong, why don't you just get the sling ring back? Problem solved. That's way too easy. You can't just have him go in and get it and do it. Maybe he's got a small collection. Who knows how many he snuck out there? But doing it through the legal wise of, okay, I've got to get a cease and desist order to drop on top of you, that leans more into the kind of goofy framework. So I think really, if you're liking the show or not liking the show, I think twisting that lens a little bit on what your expectations are, I think really kind of changes that. And to me, they really did lean on that a lot with the whole Madisynn bit, going to hell and then making a deal with a devil to get back. And I mean, just like completely ridiculous things. We get a nice little fight at the end, which is okay. But it's over the top. The dating bit, exactly the same way. Is it overtread trope? Yes. Do we want to see it? And I mean, we as a general audience, well, yeah, she's He-Hulk now. She's going to go out. That's going to make a difference. They have her as she's in dresses and things all the time. What is their dating life at? And you can still play with a lot of the same, feminine, masculine issues the show has sort of dwelt on. It was a little overused. Yeah, I think so. But, this is what people want. This is the expectations. So yeah, well, I don't think it was my favorite. I think viewing it through the just accept that it's going to be goofy and over the top and it doesn't have to make sense, then it's going to work. If you're looking like, well, how does this fit in the timelines of where's Wong at the time, that's going to drive you nuts. It's not going to work. Just don't do it.
Yeah, this is definitely a show you can't overthink. It's funny because it reminds me like a lot of, for those who are into Star Trek, of Lower Decks, and I watch them back to back because they're both coming out on Thursdays now, and I really love watching these two shows back to back because they kind of do the same thing for their respective franchises, and you kind of have to give them both a little bit of leeway. You can't overthink things too much. Like the line that I mentioned last week with the judge, how would the judge know about Thor's speeches? He wouldn't, but you gotta let those things go and enjoy the ride and have a little fun with it.
Yeah, it's a live action cartoon, folks.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the Disney Plus stuff.
Yeah, it really is. Like, this could have been animated very easily.
I mean, but there's already a lot of the suspension of disbelief in the MCU anyway. This is just a
sure
kind.
Yeah.
Again, it just leans a little bit more into that kind of extreme edge. But again, if people are watching Deadpool or anything, then if he's doing it, then it would be fine. It only gets problems because She-Hulk is doing it. Anyway, let's talk about Wong, because as we mentioned at the top, he was kind of the high point of this. He think was very used. Benedict Wong does have a great sense of humor, and I think it was kind of brought up very nicely here. And yeah, the idea that he's having problems with a person that he knows who it is, who has apparently been causing some problems for a while, and this is just the final straw. When Madisynn, with two N's and a Y, but not where you think it is. Okay. It decides to sort of fall almost into his lap, literally. But yeah, what do you guys think about using Wong and having him come back? Because again, lightly used in the last time, kind of a better used story, and it does sort of link, I think, episodes together nicely that way. Marc?
Well, so if you don't turn off your brain, which you kind of have to, if you don't just go with it, you'd be like, didn't that other judge promise to like arrest Wong for and then also how can you like show up again in the legal system and not get arrested? That's the first thing I thought, but then I brushed that thought aside. I was like, who gives a shit? It's a comedy show. Let's just go with it. But yeah, I thought it was. What did he say about Donnie Blaze? Something like I only saw the episode once. He talked so fast. Something like he was in the fraternity or something like that. I don't know. It was something.
Yeah,
really...
they brought him in. I think they got to win it in like 3 days or a week because he brought in several kegs into it with his thing. So not a serious student of the mystic arts, but a good quick learner because he does pick up a couple of things, which ends up being very useful.
Wait, aren't they a little bit? I mean, aren't they a little bit particular about who they bring in there? They just bring in any like frat boy to learn the mystic arts. Like it seems like they would have a better, I don't know, system of
someone wrote a letter of recommendation and just make acceptance on that point. And yeah, I know.
Seems like they should have higher standards than that. I'm just trying.
Yeah, well, I think maybe his father was like a rich, like billionaire and paid someone off or something.
Yeah, look, since the ancient one's been gone, the quality of recruits it's a little more varied now. It doesn't have that same admissions officer.
No, but that's definitely another thing you just have to go with.
Yeah,
but but I thought Wong. I love the use of him in this episode. As I said, I thought the comedic timing was great. I like the running joke with Madisynn spoiling Sopranos for him and everything, and how every time we see him he's watching TV. And like their comedic timing, I thought was perfect. How especially how he's like, "Oh, don't spoil this." I'm like, "Oh, I won't spoil," and then she just blurted out a bunch of spoilers.
But it was so emotional.
So yeah, and when he went to She-Hulk to file the lawsuit, it was a bit ridiculous. Like, and she was like, "We have to do this by the book." He's like, "Oh, the book of Ashanti." No, like the book of like American laws. But again, if you get to just go with it, like he wouldn't actually be that goofy, but it was funny. Like their interactions were funny, and especially like the court scene where Donnie Blaze and his attorneys were all doing like magic tricks. And I like how Wong mentions like, "Oh, I should just take him to the mirror dimension." and if you watch the ending credits, they show like Wong standing next to Donnie Blaze in the mirror dimension with all these mirrors and stuff, which I thought was funny. So I don't know if we're gonna get into Madisynn now, if I should reserve my talk for her later. But yeah,
well,
I still have some things to say about Wong.
Yeah, let's jump up to Alyssa, and then we can open things up to both Donnie Blaze and Madisynn because they do kind of all come together here.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed Wong in this episode too, and I agree with everything you said about the comedic timing. And I also agree that he's a little bit goofier here than he might be, even though there was some comedy with him in other projects. I think everybody in the show might just be a little bit goofier than they are elsewhere. Again, like in Lower Decks, you had Commander, now Captain Riker, coming in to Lower Decks a couple seasons ago, and he's totally over the top ridiculous because anybody who goes into that show is just a little goofier, a little more ridiculous. And I'm seeing the same thing in She-Hulk, that you're going to see Wong being a little goofier. And I don't think that would work for every character in the MCU. There could be, I don't know who else they're going to bring in, but there could potentially be someone that they would try to bring in. Maybe that doesn't work, but I think Wong is the perfect character for this show. And while I wouldn't want to see him every single week, because then it's basically the Wong show too, I wouldn't mind seeing him like pop up maybe by the end of the season one more time, because I do think he works really well in this format.
Yeah. Well, you're right, and this is kind of like the perfect thing for these second string villains, the supporting characters or so. You don't have Tony Stark walking through here because he's dead. But even if he wasn't, you might have Thor potentially. But no, the fact that you have more of the supporting character, you would have oh God, what's his name? The Professor Selvig. He would be in this show.
Or Darcy.
Darcy would be in one of those. Yeah, it is kind of the perfect thing for what's going on. In fact, it reminds me a bit of, again, this is a bit of a pull aside, the old Tick animated series.
Oh, yeah.
There was the Tick versus the Tick, where they went to the bar where all the heroes were and the sidekick lounge here. And this is sort of reminds me of that. This is the legal situation for the sidekick lounge. We're dealing with all of the sidekicks, the supporting characters, and your second-rate villains. Yeah. And I think that does work because, you can make them a little goofier and then just sort of readjust them when they go back into their main IP.
Yeah, but don't forget, we did get a glimpse of Daredevil in the preview and the preseason trailers. I'm really curious how he's going to fit into this world here.
Yeah, I mean, again, it does make sense. It is the other lawyer character but if you can't say that how different two different streaming shows could be is Daredevil and She-Hulk. But I want to see the mix. I do want to see the mix because I think you could do that. Also, I think Charlie Cox is awesome, and I think he could definitely lean into the humor and play that all really well if he needed to. Let's go into to Donnie Blaze, who of course is I don't know if you could say the antagonist of the episode, the defendant, the other person on the side, the troublemaker, effectively here. The idea that you have an ex-Mystic Arts student now out into the world. I mean, honestly, what it really comes down to is they need to have better property tracking in Kamar-Taj. Maybe it's just because Wong's not in the librarian anymore. Some people aren't taking over their jobs right is what's happening. And missions is all messed up. We're losing sling rings around. You can't just hand those things out like it's Halloween. But the fact that you have a failed-ish magician that now can actually pull into mystical arts, and the one thing that he can do is send people to different dimensions. Not a light power for that, but a good source of comedy. And the fact that also introduces us to Madisynn as one of the apparently many volunteers that he has brought onto the stage and sent off to someone was trapped in a parking lot in Pacoima for 2 hours once. We had her obviously sent to a parallel dimension, demonic dimension, where she had to make a deal with a goat named Eric. Was that? I can't remember the name right. In order to get back. That's nice, at least. What did you guys think overall of this main story here of dealing with our magician, the list of volunteers that he has behind him, and of course our Madisynn bit? Let's start with you, Alyssa.
I think the Donnie Blaze character grew on me a little bit. I thought at first it was a little bit, I don't know, a little bit over the top for my taste. But the more I kind of think about the minutia of it all, as I talked about at the beginning, just how like there probably would be something like this happening, and also like it does shine on the light on the fact that, I mean, Wong is not running a really tight ship there. Like, things are kind of going downhill since the Ancient One has been gone. And, but yeah, I ultimately ended up having a lot of fun with this character. And I loved that the way that that She-Hulk was at the end is holding up the demon. Is like, before I throw this last demon into another dimension, are you ready to sign this? To sign it? What was it called? The
cease and desist.
The cease and desist. Yeah. Are you ready to agree? He's like, yes. You know, that was a good fun. Yeah, and if we're talking about the Madisynn of it all, yeah, I already kind of talked about it at the start. I think they maybe went to her a little bit much. A lot of the times I just didn't. I don't know. The whole drunk girl routine was just getting a little bit old for me. But I more enjoyed her interactions with other characters, especially her and Wong, and her spoiling, the Sopranos and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that they could bring this character back in the right context and I would enjoy her, but I felt like they put the spotlight on her a little bit too much, but it's fine. It was all right overall.
Some jokes are better used sparingly and not overly repeated. In that sense, there was a certain feel like to a bad SNL skit that just sort of leans in and goes a little too long than it needed to be. And no, I agree with you. I think Madisynn was, while the spoiling was right, it was definitely, okay, we've got it. It's the drunk girl who's ridiculous over and over again. Donnie Blaze, Marc, what did you think?
So Donnie Blaze also grew on me. It was it's interesting that the guy who was like his sidekick or mentor or whatever that guy was, and how he was like, and as I mentioned at the start, like, he was kind of bombing because they live in this fantastical world, so they try to do like everyday magic tricks, but it wasn't working. So that's when he was like, the guy was kind of edging him on. You got to do the open up a dimension. You can see that he didn't really want to do that because he realized that he didn't really know how to do it properly, and he could fuck up, which is exactly what happened. And so I thought that was an interesting dynamic. I love the scene where his psychic guy was just parroting everything he said. And she all pointed out, and he was like, "Yeah, maybe," and kept doing.
Gotta have your hype, man.
That was funny. And then the Madisynn with what, I don't know. I think maybe she grew on me a bit too. Actually, I did kind of appreciate how nonchalant she was about, like, oh, I went to this demon universe and it was like whatever, and then it was kind of fun, and it was not so fun, and it was spooky fun, and how I just made some deal with this guy. I had to give him like 4 drops of my blood or something. Like, the nonchalant about the serious stuff, I thought was really funny. And I actually think it is again like a goofy thing that you have to suspend disbelief for, but the fact that she's always drunk, like, isn't she ever sober? Like, she just shows up with a drink and hands it to the bailiff.
I know people like that. I mean, there's people like that in life.
Fair enough. But the way she's just, a stereotype of the, sorority girl, whatever. Yes, and I think maybe they did overdo it just a tad, but I think overall I thought this character was really funny, particularly her interactions with Wong. And I wouldn't be opposed to her popping in like once in a while, but for like a brief cameo, nothing as long as how she was in this episode.
Sure. And I think you brought a great point in there. I think the stuff in the courthouse, I think, all worked really well, especially because it got over the top. The fact that you have Donnie Blaze trying to do magic tricks in the midst of it, just like, stop, and you have the guy, his little boss hype man, whichever that is, like pushing him on, saying, "Yeah, that's okay, that's what it is." Or even the lawyer picking up, going,
"Yeah, the lawyer ended up doing like tricks as well."
Yeah,
my client's shows are spooky, but it's fun entertainment. Just leaning on to the way that Madisynn wasn't able to phrase that necessarily the way that
but I think
Jen would have wanted.
The other interesting thing about the courtroom scene is that they were making clear that She-Hulk was losing the case. Like the judge was actually kind of like liked Johnny Blaze and was like won over by him, which I thought was kind of fed into the ending where she had to hold that demon over him in order to win the case, which I thought was pretty funny.
That's right. It's like, look, I mean, overall, you're doing a bad thing. We just want you to stop doing the bad things. But your show, that's fine. Just try not to send people to Pacoima. No one deserves that. No one deserves that. Yeah, so I think overall this is funny, right? And it did give us a nice little kind of fight scene and action sequence at the end, which I know for most Marvel fans are like, wait, we want the punching and the swinging, and you get some great demon stuff. I thought it was a nice little team up there with Wong making a giant vacuum basically at the end to scoop the rest of them out. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I think this was. You're right. I'm not sure if it was my favorite just because it seemed to kind of drag, and I think the over stuff with Madisynn and everything dragged a little too much. Plus this next part, what we'll get into. But there were definitely some fun moments within this. I think they are starting to find a good footing underneath them for a show. This does feel a little more consistent. It didn't feel like this was one of the episodes where it didn't feel like when it ended that it just stopped in the middle of something or that I wanted more. I was like, oh, this felt like the right place to stop. This felt like the finish of a story, which is something I did like. Okay, so the kind of B story in this episode, I don't think there's too much need to dwell on it too much. The dating bit. I know there's the expectation, She-Hulk, she's going to date, and what is it going to be like? And yeah, I think it's the same as every other dating app show comedy bit that we have. It sucks. Dating sucks, folks. It's true before the app when it was just bars. It's true just with apps. But we do get to meet always a fun selection of dirtbags, which is great. Either they're ignoring you because you're not listed for them right, or they're overly into you because you're giant and green. Yeah. So, Alyssa, what you have any thoughts on our dating sequence and the pain therein?
Yeah, I mean, dating in general sucks, but dating apps is a very particular type of suckitude. Like, it's just just very unique. There's something just very unique to dating apps. Yeah, and this was in the preseason trailer, and I was not looking forward. It was, I think, in one of the earlier trailers where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like the show as much as because they really leaned in on the dating app in one of the earlier trailers. It's like, so it's something that I knew was coming and was not looking forward to. So now I'm just glad that it's kind of out of the way now. Yeah, it's just what it's. It just didn't work for me, honestly. Yeah. The series of douchebags, yeah, that's just a trope that we've seen before. Although I will say there's that one guy who called her a specimen, and I was like, wait, is he the guy who was trying to get her blood? Wait, no, he wouldn't be. It would have to be some other villain. But
that would be too easy.
Yeah. That would be weird. Maybe he also works for the guy who's trying to get blood from She-Hulk. But yeah, I don't know. The series of douchebags was just cliche. And then I did feel a little sad for her when, she was regular Jennifer and the guy was like, oh, where's She-Hulk? Okay, bye, I'm out of here. I'm like, oh, well, poor Jen Walters. But I don't know. I'm glad it's over. Honestly, I hope we don't lean too much into this in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you could metamorphically change and be better looking or more attractive or, whatever that viewpoint is in society, yeah, you'd want to try this. But then as you find out, then people are just into you because of what you are, not who you are. You get to pick. You can't put your insides on a dating app, unfortunately. I don't know how they do that. Marc, what did you think of our dating?
First of all, I didn't buy the premise that no one really wanted to date Tatiana Maslany, but they would rather date She-Hulk. I I think it. I don't know. I don't quite buy that.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, and I thought that was dumb where she had to. It seemed to me that was like bad comedy where she's like, "Oh, I'm going to take this picture of me as She-Hulk and see how much success I can get." And I don't know. Yeah, this whole storyline I thought was a wash. And then, like, the guy who seemed like the perfect hot guy who was like a doctor and then lost interest as soon as she changed back to Jennifer. Like, I don't know. That all, like, why did we need to see this? I kind of, not to sort of bring gender politics into it, but I kind of feel like if it was a male superhero, they wouldn't feel the need to do a sequence like this. I don't know. I kind of feel like we didn't need this personally.
I don't know. I could see like if it was, I could see like an Ant-Man or something like a male nerdy guy, kind of being the nerdy loser guy. I could see that, but I do agree that we didn't need this.
Well, yeah, I mean, also because again, it is kind of like just overplayed stuff. We have tilt with the sexism and misogyny and those types of get-ups and deals within the show already, so it didn't really cover any new ground outside of, like, again, dating stuff sucks, people are jerks, and you're not going to find who you're looking for on an app.
I would add, like, not only did it not cover new ground, like the other ways they handled this was much better.
Sure. Well, and the idea of like, oh, what's going to happen if I go out as She-Hulk? It's like, that's Angelina Jolie jumping onto Tinder or something like that. Okay. Yeah. It's just, you're going to get clicks. There's going to be, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. You're the new hotness that everybody loves. There's stories all around you, and now you're going to be on an app, and who do you think you're going to get? It's just, yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, I was also a little surprised that nobody recognized Jennifer Walters as She-Hulk, because I thought that was pretty public. That what her alter ego was. Like, I could see why some people would miss that. They don't pay that close attention to it. But I feel like at least one person would like, oh, hey, aren't you She-Hulk?
Yeah.
Sure. And that might be an interesting thing. And maybe if they end up revisiting the dating things, that's what will end up happening. But yeah, and I think that's where you have to look at it through those Harvey Birdman cartoon glasses is, well, yes, of course, but the human is boring. The She-Hulk is exciting. And that's the only thing that we need to do. We're just showing a difference here. We need no logic. Yeah. Now, okay, so the way the episode ends up, I have to say, we've had Titania sprinkled throughout. She's mentioned in the news a couple of times. I love it. Superhero influencer or superhuman influencer, I think they described her once in like episode 2, which was kind of hilarious. But I have to say, this to me is the most goofy, lawyerly, perfect choice. While I'm thinking that Wong going after Donnie Blaze and not just getting the sling ring, you have to lean into the goofy on this. This is brilliant. Trademarking the hero's name before they can and using that against them. That seems like a fun lawyer comedy show premise. And I love that. And it's weird because we know nothing else. She's been in one scene. She's been in the background. I don't know if this is going to be a big villain or not. Is this is this going to be the finale type kind of fight here going against? Is this going to be just a background thing? I'm not really sure. But I just love this choice. And it's so messed up, and it's so goofy, and it's so perfect lawyer-like. To just sue the hero for her own name. I thought was just brilliant. Which I guess is going to lead into finally what we'll probably be dealing with next week. But what do you guys think about this kind of wrap up here for the story? Okay, you won your case. You saved the day. There's no more people being sent to alternate dimensions, but you're being sued on the stupid name you don't even like that you didn't choose.
Yeah. Well, I want to say though, I don't think that she's going to be like the main like end of show villain. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be whoever is behind trying to get her blood. I think,
Sure.
and I don't think that's Titania. I think that's, and I actually do want to touch on that before we leave. I kind of
Yeah.
want to get your guys' thoughts on that. But as far as Titania goes, yeah, I think that that's also brilliant. The superhuman influencer. Again, this is one of those things like the minutia of the world where, yeah, if you had people with superpowers running around, one of them's probably going to call themselves an influencer. There's probably some kind of superhuman reality show going on somewhere. Like there's the sky is the limit with all the little nooks and crannies of the world that they can explore. Yeah, and it's been a while, but I do recall that Titania was one of She-Hulk's reoccurring rivals in the comics. But yeah, I think they're going to have a little different take on this character, and I'm here for it. It was a really great hook for next week's episode, and that's really what it was. It didn't really pertain much to this week. It was more like to draw us in for what's going to happen next week, and it was very effective because I kind of am really excited to see what they're going to do with this character and this kind of lawsuit for trademarking her own name, the name that she doesn't even really want, but she's probably going to fight for. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So I'm really looking forward to that next week.
Yeah, you know, I mean, she has to. She can't get sued every time she gets on the news. It's not even her choice.
Yeah.
Mark, what did you think about our little hook for next week here?
So I don't think Titania is going to be like the main adversary. I don't think they're going to get into a huge fight. I think a better word for her would be like a rival, like someone who is going to like do legal battles and shit and just be like annoying to She-Hulk and throughout the show, like a recurring character. And I am glad they finally brought her back because they kind of just threw her in the first episode and then they kept like dropping her name after that. So I think they are going to develop her more, and there's going to be sort of a rival type of relationship between these two where they're just like don't like each other, but I think all their battles are going to be in the courtroom. So I don't know. That's just my thought of it. It's going to deal more with like the silly and minutia aspect of it, and when we get the reveal of whoever is behind that attack, that's going to be the more serious bad guy of the show.
Yeah. No,
absolutely.
I think you're right. Yeah, and it's, again, having her as a legal rival as opposed to a physical rival is kind of a perfect little twist on it. They're just doing back and forth from a legal standpoint. I
could see them getting in one more fist fight, though. I mean, we had She-Hulk and the Hulk fight each other in the first episode, and but more for a comedy kind of thing, not as as Mark said, like the main villain or anything like that. Most of their fights will be in the courtroom, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was another kind of just fist fight type thing, just for fun sort of thing, more lighthearted type of thing.
Sure. Or it'll be like, oh, fine, I'll let you use it as long as we can have an on-the-air pay-per-view showdown back in the rematch. Something like that. I could totally see them doing. They already mentioned the cage match stuff with Blonsky. So, I mean, they kind of have a setup there. Well, before we wrap things up, Alyssa, I know that you wanted to sort of bring that up, the Wrecking Crew, which we saw a little bit out last week. And of course, Dad, at the top of this episode, was really trying to set up the security system to protect his little girl. It's good dad move, It's like there's nothing you can do that your daughter can't, but that's cool. Good dad move. But yeah, you had some questions about the Wrecking Crew, and I know there's been some speculation of who is behind them.
Yeah, I wonder if you guys had any speculation. I haven't really paid much attention to what the speculation is out there. I mean, my first thought would have been, since we saw Daredevil, maybe the Kingpin, but when we last saw him, I don't know if that lends well to him reappearing in She-Hulk. I feel like they're saving that for the Echo series. So I don't think that it would be him. I would have thought, General Thunderbolt Ross, but since, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? What the hell is his name? He passed
William
away.
Hurt.
William Hurt. Yes, thank you. I was having a brain fart there. Yeah, he's passed away, so not him. So it probably will be somebody we have not yet seen in the MCU, but maybe somebody who does come from comic lore.
They're actually going to bring Sam Elliott back to play Thunderbolt Ross from the 2003 Ang Lee Hulk. They're crossing universe. I'm totally making that up. They're not doing that. I haven't heard anything.
I mean, I guess I could.
No. Yeah, but, one of the in the chat, someone had brought up the Kingpin there, and I said, well, it seems a little goofy, for that to have this trio of idiots, in construction armor to try and go get some things. But he did bring up the Rentabros moving company, the tracksuit Russians there.
Yes, I was about to mention those. There were a bunch of idiots too.
They were a bunch of idiots. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Does that give the plausible deniability? Well, if I just have these idiots do it that don't know anything about me, that could be a way for him to do it. But I agree. I think, especially for someone like Fisk, for the Kingpin, you want to keep him a little bit more in the serious realm than bringing him into the goofy realm of what She-Hulk is. So I that's the only reason that I wouldn't kind of do it, because even with the Rentabros, I think this is almost too silly to do. But it is the most likely that since we're going to have Daredevil in. He is. It's like, well, I don't necessarily think it's him. He is kind of at the top of my list because I don't know who else they have, and I'm not familiar enough with She-Hulk to know if there is any other hidden character or anything like that. Maybe this is how they bring the leader back with Nelson.
That's a possibility. Yeah, I just don't think the way that they left it, making us think that, the Kingpin was killed when obviously we know he wasn't. I feel like that needs to lead into the Echo series that we know is coming. Like, it just would be weird for that to then transition. It's for him to pop up in this series. I don't know. But the leader is a good idea.
Actually, I think
Tim Blake Nelson. That's who it is.
Tim Blake. Yeah, I think the leader makes a lot of sense because in the movie he got his powers from a drop of the Hulk's blood. So maybe he wants more powers, and that's why he's trying to get her blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, now that I think about that, that's who I'm going to lean on. It's the leader. Tim Blake Nelson is coming back as the leader.
I think that's a great idea, especially since we already know that they've brought back Abomination. They have really officially canonized that Ed Norton film. It was always canon, but they kind of skirted around it a lot. Didn't really mention it a lot until this series, where they're really leaning into it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say when I first saw that, Fisk was my first thought as well. It's like, it was probably him. But the more I think about it, the more I lean away from it. And I think ultimately it's probably, if not the leader, then it's probably going to be a new villain that we haven't met yet.
Yeah, and that is something entirely they could do. But see, now I'm thinking about it, I like it because Tim Blake Nelson can do the comedy as well as the serious. He could play that role. I think he could do that in this realm really well. So now that's what I want to see, folks.
And in the original Incredible Hulk movie, the leader was kind of a goofy character too. So I could see him fitting in really well in a show like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, see, there you go, folks. Spoilers are right there. Please don't do it.
We solved it.
But I think that'll wrap things up. I think we've pretty much covered each and everything. So yeah, why don't we let people know anything that you guys are doing and where they can find you? Alyssa, let's start with you. Obviously, you're doing Lower Deck stuff, right?
Yeah, you can find me over on the Listines Reviews. I'm covering Star Trek Lower Decks weekly. My review for the latest episode is already posted, episode 3 of season 3. So please check that out. Otherwise, I'll be over down on Marc's channel every Monday with Darren over here. as well, covering House of Dragon every Monday, which is a lot of fun. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be doing my own mid-season House of Dragon thing. All kinds of fun stuff. So go check it out. Please subscribe and all that stuff. See you soon.
Yeah. And of course, Marc doing House of Dragon stuff on Mondays. What else is going on?
Yeah, House of Dragon stuff. I too just released my review for Star Trek Lower Decks. Like I think it uploaded 2 minutes before we started this stream, so you can check that out. Also covering Lord of the Rings of Power, which I think might be on right now.
It should be on right now.
Yeah,
actually, I was going to watch it. I was going to watch it right after we finish here.
Yeah, that's what I'll do as well. And I do reviews for that every Saturday, and here, of course, every Thursday. And other than that, just random Star Trek stuff. I got my top 10 worst Star Trek retcons coming out in a couple of weeks, and that's a really fun video. If you like me ranting and yelling, then you would appreciate that one. Anyway, so that's where you can find me.
It is what powers the internet. That and cat videos. And of course, I'm Dee. This is Dee's Reviews. We're doing She-Hulk every Thursday night at 6 o'clock. Live discussions with myself and Marc and a rotating panel of guests. And then, of course, I'm over on his channel on Monday nights at 6 o'clock doing House of the Dragon, which I'm really enjoying. Final little thoughts. Let's see. Oh, a couple of big movies dropping. Saw Morbius. You can skip that one. And I'm looking forward to actually finally catching Thor: Love and Thunder, which I think just dropped on Disney.
Yes, I need
Disney
to watch
Plus
that
Day.
too. Yes.
So you have a choice of Marvel shows. You can watch some fun Hemsworth-led Thor, or you can hurt yourself watching Morbius. It's actually an interesting film in the sense that I think ultimately there's about a half hour of that movie that actually allows everything else to make sense, just left on the editing floor. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. I think there's more of that movie than we've seen, but not more than we need to. That's all I'm saying. All right, folks, thanks so much. We will catch you all next week. Have a great weekend. Take care now, and bye-bye. While I hit all of the buttons.